Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Hope you guys have had a great weekend so far. There's a lot to discuss in this evening's video. Severe weather looks to be a big time topic as we get into our work week. I'm talking about Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the main 3 days, especially Wednesday. And when I mention Tuesday, I mainly mean Tuesday night into overnight into Wednesday morning. Really is what I mentioned for Tuesday. But Thursday also has a threat for severe weather across portions of the southeast and the mid-Atlantic. So we're going to talk about that, but we're going to work through Tuesday, talk a lot on Wednesday, and then talk about Thursday towards the end of the video. So we're going to try to break down all the information we know. Keep in mind, we're right at the edge of when we really get into the meat of these short-range models. We call them CAMs, convective models, but we're still not quite in range, so it's hard to get very, very detailed, but we'll be able to do that really tomorrow. But we're going to give you the latest information tonight and talk about what the Storm Prediction Center is really mentioning, as it looks like Wednesday could potentially be another regional outbreak of significant or severe thunderstorms. So if you guys have not subscribed, definitely consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. You guys got anything I can pray about, please put it in the comments below. It gives me an opportunity to pray over it. It gives others an opportunity to do so too. I'm also asking for an unspoken prayer request for myself, and I really appreciate people who do pray for me, and it really does mean a lot. So we can all look out for one another and glorify God doing it. So let's start talking about the weather here. Let's take a look at the satellite loop. And this is a little different than what I normally show you guys. This is showing basically the entire lower 48. Mexico, Central America, the Atlantic Ocean, the Eastern Pacific Ocean. And the reason I'm showing you this is you see this little cinnamon roll swirl out here. That is the system about to work its way into California, then into the Southwest, and then into South Central U.S. And that's going to promote several days of significant severe weather across portions of the lower 48. But that is the system right there, that swirl. And that is our upper trough that's going to make its way, a shortwave trough, and create a dangerous environment for storms. So let's talk about what it's going to do here. And here it is. You see this big blue blob over here? Think of that as basically our system, our upper trough that works our way into the Pacific coast, keeps moving. We're getting into Tuesday morning, Tuesday midday, Tuesday afternoon, and this is when it starts to pivot that moist air. A moist sector. Now, I'm not talking about moist air like dew points all the way into the 70s or upper 60s, but it's enough moist air to deal with to get surface-based storms or elevated storms. Now, what kind of hazards are we going to have with this Tuesday or Tuesday overnight threat? Now, we're going to talk about that because I don't think Tuesday night is going to be a significant, it could trend into an enhanced risk. Right now, it's just a slight risk. But we're going to watch to see what this does. I don't want to say too much on it because a lot of times these end up trending worse in time. But right now, you just got a slight risk. Slight risk, a pretty large slight risk. So if there's going to be an enhanced risk, there's plenty of room for it. This goes all the way up to around Kansas City, all the way down to almost including Austin, Texas, and every major city and town in between. So there's a lot of wiggle room for this to move or this to increase or decrease. But really, I think the biggest risk with this, and this is really for Tuesday overnight, I really think starting to get into the late evening, into the nighttime hours, everybody's starting to go to sleep. I think the biggest risk with this will be large hail and damaging winds with some isolated tornadoes. But we'll talk about what we do know about this system. Here it is. I'll stop this for around Tuesday afternoon. Moist air, dew points well into the 60s, rising all the way up into Missouri, even dew points into the 60s and 50s, almost all the way into southern Iowa. So you have a decently moist atmosphere. Nothing crazy or anything like that, but there is enough moist air to deal with in this area to create severe weather. That's one thing that you obviously need for severe weather. Now, you look at the low-level jet. The low-level jet doesn't really get those wind fields that we talk about, the kinematics. It doesn't really get ramped up for the threat for your Tuesday and the overnight Tuesday until we get, like I said, into the overnight hours. You start to get into 11, 12, 1 a.m. in the morning, and then the low-level jet cranks up, and then that's when you have the potential to reach that triple point, which will probably be up here where you have a little bit of cake to deal with, kinematics that are favorable, and then the dew points. So there will be an isolated tornado threat somewhere in the slight risk, and tomorrow we will know where the highest area of a tornado threat is. But basically, if you live in Kansas, Oklahoma, and central to northern areas of Texas, and even areas into Missouri and small well, not a small section, a pretty large area of Nebraska, watch out for some severe weather. But do I think this is going to be an outbreak of dangerous storms for your Tuesday and the Tuesday overnight? Right now, I don't think so. But we'll look at the CAPE that we're dealing with, the convective energy. And I wanted to get a little bit closer look at this, but this is basically valid for around Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening for this region. There's not a lot of CAPE to deal with. Not really a lot either. Anywhere from, I don't know, we'll go with this another route here, and we'll go a little bit later into the night. Anywhere from 500 to maybe as much as 1,200 CAPE joules per kilogram. So not a lot of CAPE to deal with, but when you mash a couple hundred joules per kilogram the CAPE to an environment that you already have other key elements for severe weather, it does a lot. And this is especially going to be the case for your Wednesday threat, and I'm about to talk about that too. So we still just don't know a whole lot about this. And in fact, I'll show you guys what the latest NAM looks like for this. And, I'll show you this real quick, and we'll go all the way to the last couple frames, which takes us to about 10, 11, 12 a.m. Central Standard Time. And it shows the storms developing right here into central Texas areas of southern Oklahoma as we're into about midnight to 1 o'clock in the morning for your Wednesday morning. And you see the storms really start to erupt, but it's pretty late. It's after, the sun goes down. So we have to watch. You watch out for these little storms too, because this is really close to that triple point we talk about. Could produce maybe a quick nighttime tornado. We have to watch this. But this is the big dog threat right here. And I hope you guys have continued to tune in this late in the video, because this is the big threat right here. The evolution of this is going to be interesting. Is it going to be like a quasi-linear convective system, which, there's no point in making that long drawn out term. Call it a squall line with embedded tornadoes are possible with this. Are there going to be any prefrontal storms that form ahead of this in Mississippi and Alabama? We really won't know that until we can get inside the short-range models. But right now, even the Storm Prediction says in their discussion right down here, there's some questions with this system, and I'm about to break down all the elements that we have, the dynamics that we have in place for this severe weather event. Right now, the question is the atmosphere going to be destabilized in front of this line? So are you going to have any prefrontal storms, supercells? Right now, what is the most high confidence with this is you're at the very least, going to have a nasty line of storms moving through Mississippi and Alabama Wednesday. A line of storms that are going to have very, very favorable kinematics, a wind field that is going to be very favorable for quick spin-ups inside this line. In fact, this happened last Tuesday. I think we had more tornadoes involved with the line of storms Tuesday than we did with those prefrontal storms. I can't confirm that. Well, we had about, half and half when it comes to all the confirmed tornadoes for last Tuesday. So, which I think will be comparable to this system for this coming Wednesday, but a 30% risk up. And this includes all the cities that you see below, almost includes Birmingham, but Jackson, Mississippi. This is basically an enhanced risk at day 4. So when you're waking up tomorrow morning, is this going to be still an enhanced risk or a moderate risk? You remember last week when we had an enhanced risk down in the same area, when we went to day 3, it immediately jumped to a moderate risk, which is level 4 out of 5. We haven't had a high risk yet. So dangerous situation coming up. And we look at the dynamics in place. Let's take a look just at the GFS, because we're not in range of these short range models. We're getting into Wednesday afternoon, and I know this looks just like a blob of yellow and green and red and orange, but think of this as just a nasty squall line moving through Mississippi that's capable of producing tornadoes. And these are the most dangerous setups because you really don't see them. They kind of come out of nowhere and they're right in front of basically a line of storms. They're normally very quick moving, and it's hard to know when they're coming, when they're wrapped up in these rain-wrapped squall lines. So it's very hard to figure out what exactly is evolving, and all of a sudden it hits you and you don't know what hit you. And this continues, I really think, until we get into the evening hours. As we get into the evening hours into Alabama, there could be another flood risk with this. And then what happens to the Carolinas? I'll mention the Carolinas and then Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic here when we're talking about Thursday. But dew points, this is going to be a fast-moving, moist sector. It's not going to be a slow-moving one. We're getting into Wednesday afternoon. I'm talking about 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon Wednesday. Fast-moving, moist sector. You know, you got dew points well into the 60s, maybe close to 70 in Louisiana. Dew points rising into the 60s all the way up into Kentucky, southern areas of the Ohio Valley. I think there'll be a severe weather threat up there also for your Wednesday. But also, you know, you got to think you're not going to have as much moist air, probably not as much CAPE, but you're going to have a lot of kinematics even up there. And then this keeps going. Moist sector continues to slide through, and then more stable air moves through, and then the threat shifts to more Thursday. But then this is what I want y'all to look at right here. This is the low-level jet. So this is about a mile up in the atmosphere, give or take a couple thousand feet. You got a low-level jet along this line of storms screaming out the south, a low-level jet pushing 80, 90, maybe 100 knots. So you have a ton of wind energy with this system. You look at that, and this continues through Alabama. So, I mean, this is obviously going to mix the surface. So not only are you going to have strong winds with these storms and damaging winds, you're also going to have winds just gusty as all get out ahead of this line. It's going to be just... It's going to feel like last Tuesday. You know, I was in Mississippi last Tuesday, and it was gusty ahead of the lines, and the clouds were moving what looked like 1,000 miles per hour. They were so close to look like you could touch them, and that's a low-level jet. You match this with the mid-level jet, which will be coming pretty fast too, but this is more out the southwest, so you have a veering in the low levels of the atmosphere, and that creates a directional shear. So you're going to have a lot of that. You know, I'll do a sounding here right in the middle of this enhanced risk. And this is a tornado sound. You have these long stretched out photographs that are looping. So that means you have curving when you get into the low levels of the atmosphere. I mean, it's almost pushing 80 degrees in areas. You know, when I was in Mississippi last Tuesday, it was only in the low 70s. So you have temperatures ahead of this line pushing almost 80 degrees. So a lot of surface heating. How much surface heating do you have? And you look at the sounding right here. You know, it's not super moist. You have areas up in the low to mid levels where you have a little bit of dry air. Does this trend to more dry air? I think if it does, aloft, you have more steep lapse rates, then I think it will allow for more prefrontal storms to form ahead of this squall line. If that is the case, it's going to be nasty as far as supercells forming ahead of this storm. But overall, this is a pretty moist column, meaning you're going to have a lot of convection. You're probably going to have a lot of clouds. And, you know, a lot of times that's the case when you have these big-time severe weather threats in the south. But a lot of times it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. But, you know, this is nasty kinematics. When I say kinematics, just think of wind energy aloft. All the winds screaming aloft, even at the surface. So damaging winds are pretty much a bet. Tornadoes are almost a bet too, but is it going to be an outbreak of tornadoes? The Storm Prediction Center seems to think that there is going to be a regional outbreak possible of tornadoes. So we have to watch this for sure. We keep this moving here, and the CAPE that builds ahead of this line is huge. Let me tell you, if you get CAPE values that reach 1,500, 2,000 joules per kilogram ahead of this line, we're going to have a tornado outbreak. And ahead of this line, you have CAPE that builds over 1,000. Surface-based CAPE. So you got to watch this. When we get into these short-range models, do we have some nasty CAPE that bubbles up ahead of this line? And then that all depends on if you have the sun that comes out. Does it destabilize the atmosphere? Does the atmosphere remain relatively stable? Do you have a lot of convection and rain ahead of this line that helps kind of tamper down the severe weather threat because the atmosphere isn't able to take advantage of basically the destabilized atmosphere? We're just not quite sure yet. But we will know so much more here in 24 hours. But one thing that looks dangerous with this is you are pretty much have a sure bet that this is going to go negatively tilted. You see how these lines, how they bow out this way? That is a negatively tilted trough. When they bow out this way, that's positively tilted. When they just kind of bow out like that, that's a neutrally tilted. And we talked about this in winter. When they go negatively tilted, the dynamics increase so much more, especially wind. Kinematics, that wind energy, that really just goes absolutely insane and goes crazy. So negatively tilted trough always spells trouble. That was, there was a massive negatively tilted trough when you had the outbreak of tornadoes in Alabama back in 2011. That's a great example of that. It's hard to compare anything to that, but That's not what I'm doing, but I'm saying anything that goes negative normally means you're going to have some kind of impactful system. So let's kind of branch away from Wednesday. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video. It's going to be huge because we're going to be inside these short range models. But 15% risk, a slight risk for your day 5, which is for Thursday into Friday morning. And really, this is going to be because you're going to have an expansive wind field, a loft. So you're not just a loft, you're going to have a lot of wind energy ahead of this also. But I really think the biggest threat with this will be damaging winds. But there's going to be a tornado threat with this also, just like there was on that third risk day last week for your Wednesday. It was confirmed tornadoes. It was a confirmed EF2 in upstate South Carolina that just was on the ground for like a mile or two, and then that was it. But the damage it did was EF2 damage. So it's crazy. You never know when it's going to land right on you. So here you go. You look at a more broader picture of the eastern U.S., and you'll see dew points for your Thursday rising into the 60s. So you got a pretty enlarged moist sector rising all the way into the Delmarva area, areas of PA. So you had the moist air to deal with, right? And the one thing I want to mention about the Carolinas, Georgia and the Carolinas, this looks like a classic example where the main energy will move over this region right here, the country of the Southeast is what I mean, overnight. So that might help y'all as far as not seeing the nastiest severe weather. It's like, let me try to explain this the best way I can. So, for example, Tuesday's threat, nastiest weather's right into here, right? And then it moves over this area overnight. So that's why if you look kind of right in here, and then you jump to day, I'm trying not to brain fart, day 4, you see how there's nothing really in this area? It's because over into the overnight hours, a more stable environment moves over this area. So you're not going to have the crazy severe weather. Now, sometimes when you have so much dynamics in place, it doesn't matter if it's overnight. That kind of was the case last Monday night into Tuesday when you still had tornadoes ongoing in eastern Texas and areas of Louisiana. But in this case, I really think the nastiest weather will move through Georgia and maybe South Carolina, for example, overnight. So therefore, it won't be nasty, if you get what I'm saying. So we'll have to watch to see how that unfolds. But I do think regardless, it's going to be very gusty, very windy. So we'll look at the low-level jet. This really gets cranked up over this area right here, right where this 15% risk area is, right as you get that daytime heating. This is around 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So the low-level jet gets cranked up over this area, right where the surface heating begins to occur. Temperatures probably rising into the 60s and 70s in this area. You got dew points well into the 60s. And then you compare that with the convective levels, the CAPE levels in this region. And we'll see what they're reading around Thursday afternoon. And you got CAPE readings, 500 to 1,000 joules per kilogram. So you have a little bit of juice in the air. But if you mixed a little bit of CAPE, the thermodynamics, and with a little bit of moist air, this in the 60s, with a low-level jet cranking over this area, probably pushing 50 to 60, maybe 70 knots in certain areas, you're going to have severe weather. And that's why you have the 15% risk ultimately in this area, right where all those dynamics are the highest in one area, if you get what I'm saying. So that's all I got, guys. Stay tuned tomorrow. Tomorrow evening is going to be a big video. We'll be in range of these short-range models, and we'll have a lot to discuss. So that's all I got. God bless everybody. You'll have a great ending to your weekend and have a great start to your work week.